Hello, good day to one and all. This is Miss Krishna Sundar A, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Mancheri. In the last class, we already had a detailed discussion on the major film theories. We had a general introduction to film theories and we even discussed formalism. We also had a detailed discussion on the different movements pertaining to film studies. So today we will be discussing realism, auteur theory, apparatus theory, SUTURE theory, and culture industry. So to start with, we'll start with realism. So realism, as the name suggests, is all about a realistic portrayal of events through cinema. Now, this kind of a theory actually developed during the post-World War period, and that began in Europe. So this was in fact a decisive shift in the field of theories pertaining to movies. Now, the main person or the proponent behind this theory was André Bazin from France. I'm sure you are familiar with this name because he's a very famous film critic. So, André Bazin has a film magazine which was titled as Cahiers du Cinéma, and a number of scholarly articles based on movies appeared in this magazine. And André Bazin was a very influential film critic at this point of time. And this magazine, this film magazine, was actually co-founded by Bazin, Valcroze, and Duca. Now, Bazin believed that film's defining feature is to connect with social realities. So, a realistic film means a movie which can actually portray the social realities. It can actually speak about the truths relating to a society. Now, this realism dominated the post-World War era because what people wanted was not a dreamy kind of movie, not a movie which transports them to a paradise, but they wanted realistic events portrayed in movies. Now, he has written a very famous article titled as The Ontology of Photographic Image. So this is written by André Bazin. And in this article, he speaks about film's power to capture life, how the camera can capture one moment in life. Now, Bazin was not interested in the formal and technical manipulations of a film structure. So this is slightly going in contrast with what we already discussed in formalism, because in formalism, everything was based on the formal practices, which was always connected with framing, scaling, lighting, editing, special effects, slow motion, etc. But André Bazin believed that these kind of structural practices cannot make a movie successful. So his main intention was to show the complexities of life through cinema. So this included both narrative and visual realism. And in fact, he was against the formalistic kind of aspects connected with films. He was against the structural aspects of films. He believed that the defining feature of a movie was its ability to bond with the social world and to truthfully depict life in all its complexities. So, in short, he says that realism means a movie should showcase a slice of life. So, this was a key term used in connection with realism. A slice of life should be portrayed through movies. Now, if you look at some of the examples in connection with realism, Jean Renoir's The Rules of the Game is one of the most important movies which can be categorized as a realistic movie. Again, there is Roberto Rossellini's Rome, the Open City. Again, you can see Pather Panchali, Aparajito, and Apur Sansar, the movies by Satyajit Ray, which is again considered as the Apu trilogy. And again, I am sure you can identify the picture, the right side picture on the top, where you can see a scene which is actually the last scene, the climax, final scene of the movie 400 Blows, directed by Francois Truffaut. So this is actually the last scene where you can see the freeze frame. And if you have watched this movie, definitely you should have watched this movie because this is a part of your syllabus. So if you have watched this movie, you can see how this movie is so realistically portrayed. It is a story of a young boy, the trials and tribulations that he actually goes through in his life, and how he overcomes the stage in his life. Now, there is a very beautiful scene in the last part of the movie where the boy is questioned, or he is in fact interviewed by an adult. So there are a number of questions asked, and if you look at the way in which that scene has been depicted, it is very, very realistically depicted. You can see the boy is not sitting in one single position. He keeps changing his posture. He keeps moving from one side to the other. His hands are in constant motion. So, this is exactly how a boy at this age would behave. So, this is realistically pictured, this is realistically portrayed. So, these are some of the best examples for realism. So, coming to the present era, some of the beautiful movies which are still showcasing realism can be grouped into different categories because realism again has got different dimensions. Now there is something called psychological realism. Again, there is something called hyper realism. So psychological realism means you are actually looking into the depth, the psychological depth of a character. Rather than the external factors, you are actually analyzing the internal factors of a character, which means it is actually a psychological study of the character. What happens inside his or her mind, or what goes through the character's mind? Maybe the emotions, anger, passion, love. So you're analyzing the internal context of the character and you call that psychological realism. Now, the best examples for psychological realism, one is the movie Room, which was released in the year 2015, which is actually a recent movie. Now, Room was actually a novel written by a Canadian Irish writer, Emma Donoghue, and this was later released as a movie in the year 2015. The novel came out in the year 2010 and later it was revamped into the structure of a movie titled as Room in the year 2015. Now, this movie actually speaks about the story of a mother and a son. Now, the mother and the son, both of them are kidnapped by a male character. And throughout the movie, we see that these two people are stuck inside one single room. The boy is actually born inside this room and he's around 5 years at the time when the novel begins or the movie begins, and the boy has not seen another world. He hasn't seen anything outside this one single room. So the entire movie is about the psychological aspects of this mother and son. So that's a beautiful movie. So please do watch it if you get a chance. Now again, there is another beautiful movie which is titled as Her, which got released in the year 2003. Now, this is a movie directed by Spike Jonze, who's again another American filmmaker. On the other hand, the movie Room was directed by Lena Abrahamson. Okay, so you can see here in the movie Her, as you can see in the picture, the hero's role is played by the great actor Joaquin Phoenix. And in this movie, this lonely character, his name is Theodore. His character name is Theodore, and Theodore is a lonely character. He is in the final stage of his divorce, and finally, you can see he gets connected with an OS. Okay, he gets connected with an operation system, and this is actually a software. And the software has got a female sound. So this is exactly something like Alexa in our modern times. Okay, so it has got a female sound and it can actually talk with you. It can have some interesting conversations with you. So he actually gets totally involved in this sound, which is actually emitted by this operating system, which is actually an application, an OS, and he falls in love with this character. I don't know if we can call it as a character. The name of this lady is Samantha. So just like we use the term Alexa today, so this is Samantha, and he falls in love with this character. Not character, actually, this is a part of artificial intelligence. So this movie actually portrays how the psychology of this character Theodore works. So this is what you call as psychological realism. Then comes hyperrealism, which means more than real recreation of an image. So it is not the real image, but the portrayal is actually something more than the real image. And the best example is Alexandro Inarritu's Birdman. So this is actually a latest movie which is again released in the year 2014. And in this movie, the story moves in such a way that a star, an actor, is trying to get back to his career. So, this is all about this actor, and in this movie, hyperrealism often comes. So, this actually mingles with physical reality and virtual reality, and sometimes it connects human intelligence and artificial intelligence. So, this is all about realism. Now, see, all these concepts are actually very, very vast concepts. All the theoretical aspects that you are studying in connection with film studies are actually very, very huge terms which can actually run into a number of books, terms, and technical aspects. So, we are just concentrating on the main ideology here, just putting it into simple terms so that it becomes easier from the examination point of view. Okay, so moving on to the next one. The next theory is Auteur theory, which is somewhat a very popular kind of theory. Now, the post-World War period saw two theories booming up. So this was in fact after the 1940s. And if you remember, the Second World War was between the period 1939 and 1945. And during the 1940s, the after effect of the Holocaust actually brought into light two different theories connected with films. Now, one is the Auteur theory, which began during the 1940s, and then comes structuralism, which came during the 1960s. In simple words, auteur theory means the director is the all in all of a movie. There is no one else who's getting the credit. The entire credit of a movie lies in the hands of the director. So the director is actually represented as a divine being. The director is considered as the supreme authority of the movie. So the filmmaker, the director, is considered as the single aesthetic genius. And he is the one who's shouldering the entire worth of the movie. So see, the credit is not shared by anybody else. It is completely getting into the hands of the director. Now, this actually originated in France. Now, this is again a theory which is connected with André Bazin, the same French film critic. So, the theory was put forward together by André Bazin and Alexander Astruc. So, the theory originated in France and it slowly started getting spread towards the entire locations in Europe. So, this actually corresponds with a literary work and its author. So it's just like the authorship of a work. Now, whenever a novel or a book is released, whichever genre it might be from, maybe a short story collection or a novel, or maybe some kinds of experience sharing or essay collection, whatever it may be, the entire credit of the book is always given to the author. We only think about the publishers or the people associated with it, somebody who had gone through the book and edited the book. We don't give any importance to those people. Sometimes we even forget the characters within the work, but the entire importance is actually given to the author. In a similar way, the entire importance is given to the director in a movie. So, one thing that you have to remember here is that most of these theories are actually theories coming from literature, anthropology, philosophy, etc. Because movies or film studies have actually taken up different theoretical aspects from different disciplines. So, this actually corresponds with the authorship of a work. Something just like how an author becomes the all in all of a book, the director can be considered as the all in all of a movie. So, this was also connected with the French New Wave. Now, Francois Truffaut's movie 400 Blows is actually coming as a part of this. So the director is considered as a supreme being, and it is always suggested that the best cinema contains a personal stamp of the director. Now, see, years before, we never gave importance to the directors. Even if you look at Malayalam movies during the 1980s and 1990s, we don't really remember the names of the directors. More than the names of the directors, we give our focus on the actors. And that is how we define a movie. We define the movie as a Mohanlal movie or as a Mammootty movie, but very hardly or very rarely we actually define the movie with the name of the director. So we never speak about terms like this is Patmarajan's movie or this is KG George's movie. We often associate it with the actors. But now, recently, this trend is going down because the prominence for the directors, this is again coming up, just like what we had once with this Auteur theory. So many consider filmmaking as a collaborative work. So this is a point where we are taking a deviation. Can you just say that the director is the supreme being in a movie? Because a movie is not an individual work. It is a group work. It is a collaborative work. There are lots of units which are coming together to make a movie a movie. So it is not an individual work. What the director does is the director's work. There are so many other things which needs to be done, right? There are actors, actresses, the context, screenplay is there, editing is there, camera techniques, and so many other production units which are connected with this. Now, Ostrich actually said that camera stylo is what happens here. So this is actually connecting this with camera pen, which means audio, video elements. Everything within a movie is completely in the hands of the director. So it is a director who decides everything, and therefore the director becomes the supreme being. This is what Ostrich wanted to convey. Now later, Auteur theory was challenged by many other theorists and theories. So cinema is a director's art. It is just in the hands of the director. This concept or this kind of a theory was challenged by many other film theorists in the later era. Now, structuralism was one such concept which actually questioned this auteur theory. Now, structuralism actually is about the structures behind filmmaking. So it includes the mode of production, sometimes the impact of actors, sometimes the context of the movie, and in fact the techniques used or cinematic techniques used. So this is why we call it as a collaborative work. So from the perspective of structuralism, there are so many units associated with a movie, and in such a scenario, how can you give importance to the director alone? So this is how this becomes questioned. Now again, Christian Metz, another French film critic, has actually spoken so much details in connection with film semiotics. So this again actually categorizes the movie into different units, just like we categorize different units in language. So Christian Metz is again suggesting the very same thing, that this cannot be completely pushed into the hands of the director, because a movie has got different units, production units, different kinds of techniques used. So it is a collaborative work when you structuralize it, which means when you categorize it into different units. So this kind of a credit cannot be given completely to the director. Now I just want to take you through some of these pictures. Can you identify any of these directors? Because all these directors are considered as auteurs. Auteurs means they have created their own personal stamp in the history of movies. Okay, so the first one is Alfred Hitchcock, who is very famous for his movie Psycho. Then comes Martin Scorsese. Then there is Stanley Kubrick, Tarantino, and then there is Christopher Nolan, who belongs to this modern stage of film studies or film interpretation. So these are some of the great auteurs in film studies. So they have created some beautiful movies which have actually tested the time, which has stood the test of time. So moving on to the next one. The next one is apparatus theory. Now apparatus theory, as the name suggests, is something which is connected with a machine or an equipment. Now apparatus means, maybe if you had been into science streams earlier, you would know what an apparatus is. It is actually a machine, or it could be an equipment which is used for a particular activity. Now, this theory actually came up during the 1960s and 1970s, and this was a theory which had its hold on Marxism, structuralism, and psychoanalysis. Now, see, I'm sure that you might have gone through these theories when you study the criticism paper, Marxist theory, structuralism, and psychoanalysis. So, as I've mentioned before, most of these literature theories have been embedded into film theories as well. Now, the apparatuses used in cinematic technology. So this is what apparatus theory states. There are lots of machines and equipment used in cinematic technology. Now please remember, the plural form of equipment is not equipments. You can't add s because that is not proper English. The plural form of equipment is just equipment. The plural form of machinery is just machinery. You can't say machineries because if you say that, that is wrong. So equipment. Okay, so the apparatuses used in cinematic technology. All these machines or all these equipment used in cinematic technology created a sense of reality for the audience. Okay, so the theorist here is Jean-Louis Baudry, and he has come out with two important points in connection with this apparatus theory. Now, these two key points actually became the fundamental concept for the socio-cultural impact of cinema on society. So let's see what these points are. So this is actually Baudry. So his theory in connection with this apparatus in movies actually brought forth two key elements in the history of film studies. Now the first point that he says here is that camera is an apparatus. Camera is a device, it is a machine, and therefore what it captures and what it tells you, what it might tell the audience is just an optical illusion, which is not objective reality. Now, this is what Baudry says. The camera, which is an apparatus, can create only optical illusions, which means it is not clearly the reality. It is not the realistic picture. So, cinematic image is just a construction or production. It is not a realistic image. So, please listen. This apparatus theory is standing in contrast with realistic theory, which we learned. We learned about realism put forward by Andre Bazin, where he said that a film's defining feature is actually showing reality in movies. Okay? But now, in apparatus theory, Baudry says that what is shown in a film is actually captured by the camera. And this camera can only give you an optical illusion which is not objective reality. So, what Bazin said about realism, Baudrillard is completely talking against it. So, cinematic image is a constructed image, it is not a real image. Now, this also gets connected with Guy Debord's, the French theorist, another book which is titled as The Society of the Spectacle. Now, the Society of the Spectacle here means that there are certain constructions remaining in every society, certain social standards, or as you can call it as social constructions, which you cannot break in one single day. And those social constructions will be portrayed again through cinema. So, in other words, cinema is just trying to showcase some of the existing social constructions in a society. So, this is a book which speaks about this in detail. So, Baudrillard has also taken some elements from this. So, the first key point is that camera is just a device, it is an apparatus, it can only create an illusion. It is not the realistic aspect. It is not objective reality. Now, the second point is that cinematic apparatus is not just the camera, but it includes the entire production. Now, this is again against Auteur theory. So, see, all the theories that we are learning, one theory either sidelines the other theory, or sometimes it gets into a contradictory statement with a previous theory. So, this is how it works. Now, see, when formalism was introduced, people like Andre Bazin, who stood for realism, criticized formalism. And when apparatus theory came up, those people who believed in apparatus theory, they started criticizing those people who stood for realism. So see, with the passage of time, most of these theories have been criticized and many other theories started coming up. So the second point here is that cinematic apparatus is not just the camera, but it includes the entire production. So coming to the earlier point, it was already suggested that this had taken some elements from Marxism. This has taken elements from psychoanalysis, etc. So let's see how it is getting connected with Marxism. Now, Louis Althusser, again another great theorist, a Marxist theorist, he has spoken about the term ideological apparatuses. Now, I'm sure you might have heard about it, but sometimes you might not be having a very clear-cut idea based on that. Now, this is a very vast subject. And as I told you, each technical term that you are studying in film studies can actually give you millions of associated books and connected theories. So let's not dive into those unnecessary details, just understand what it is in simple terms. So how is this apparatus theory getting connected with Marxism or Althusser? This is what we are discussing now. Now, Althusser has already talked about ideological apparatuses. Now, what is this ideological apparatus? Now, ideological apparatus means there will be certain social constructions in every society. And these social constructions will be controlling the people in different ways. For example, the state. Now, the state will somehow impose certain rules on its citizens. Now, we all know how it worked during the corona times, okay, where we had to wear the mask, we are not supposed to go out. There were lots and lots of imposed rules at the time of corona. Now, this is actually imposed by the state. Now, similarly, the church or any other religious institutions, they can also impose some kind of control over their citizens. Now, when it is a church or a mosque or a temple, it comes in a religious way. It can impose some kind of control over the people through religious methods. Again, family. Family is also a social construction because within family, there is a way by which one member can control the other members. So there are certain kinds of restrictions, certain kind of lack of freedom that all of us will have to go through with this ideological apparatus. So this is what Althusser spoke about ideological apparatus. Now the same theory has been extended by Baudry in connection with film studies, because Baudry says that film is also a social construction by which certain social aspects are put forward to the audience, which means a film is not actually showing reality, but a film is just showcasing what the society wants to be showcased to its audience. In the same way, this is also getting connected with psychoanalysis and Lacan. I'm sure you might have heard the names of Freud and Jacques Lacan, and Lacan's mirror stage is very important. Now, Lacan says, according to now, mirror stage again is a very complicated, very sticky kind of area, so you needn't go to the details. So just understand what is mirror stage. Now, according to Lacan, after 6 months, a baby starts looking at its own reflection in the mirror. Okay? And when a baby looks at its own reflection in the mirror, the baby feels that the mirror image is more better, more perfect than the real image that he has got. Now, sometimes we all feel that, right? Now, this mirror stage, Lacan considers as the first stage in which the ego, the concept of I begins in the child. Till then, there is no I, you for the child. But only when the child finds its own image in the mirror, the child realizes that there is a concept like I. So, this is the first stage where illusion begins. The concept of ego begins. So, this illusory stage is again coming back in Baudry's theory, because through cinema you are taken into an illusory world, and sometimes social constructions are once again put forward to you, but you never realize that they are coming in this form, but you accept it in a different way. So cinematic apparatus is a structural domination. This is what Baudry wanted to tell you. It is a structural domination, means outwardly it might not look so, but internally this is what happens. Now, despite the other views, Baudry believed that cinema is yet another medium to maintain the existing state of affairs. So whatever the state is doing, whatever the society is doing, whatever religion is doing, whatever family can do, this movies can only be an extension of this, imposing some orders or giving you some ideas based on social construction. So this is just a repetitive idea that cinema is giving you. So cinema produced its own meaning, but this meaning is always in association with the social structures. So this is what is meant by apparatus theory. So now we are moving on to the next one. Now, this is known as SUTURE theory. Now, please understand it's pronounced as SUTURE. Sure sound is coming. Now, SUTURE theory, the term suture is actually a medical term. It is actually a term which is used in between a surgical process when a wound is stitched, which means when a wound remains open, you are actually covering the wound with a stitch, and this is what you call as the surgical process, suture. So here the absence is covered. Now again you can see Jacques Ellen Miller came up with this term as a commentary on Lacan's 1964 seminar. So this is actually a very simple theory. Unlike the term, the idea is very simple. Now, when a movie happens in a theater, just imagine the movie happens in a theater, and as a part of the audience structure, you are sitting and watching the movie. So actually, I, you, we, all these people are not really a part of the movie. We are not part of that movie. The movie is a movie. We are taking the tickets, we are getting into the cinema theater, and we are watching the movie. We are not a part of the movie in the literal sense. But imagine if it is a very interesting movie, you get completely engrossed in the movie, you become a part of this movie even without you realizing it. Right, this happens. Sometimes you get so engrossed into the movie, you feel like you are inside the movie. This is the process that he is describing, which means how the viewer is stitched into the course of the cinema. Actually, the viewer is an outside element. Okay, we are not a part of the movie. The viewer is actually absent within the movie. The viewer is not inside the movie, but the viewer is actually outside the movie. But this viewer is actually stitched into the course of the cinema, and this is what this author talks about. Now, it is also getting connected with another theory put forward by Althusser, which is a theory of interpellation. Now, interpellation in simple terms is actually the process by which we internalize certain cultural and social codes automatically. So, whether we realize it or not, certain social constructions will be a part of our psychological aspect, and a viewer is actually taking an ideological position. Whatever comes from the society, we automatically internalize it and we take an ideological position when we watch a movie. So even though we are remaining as an outside element, we become a part of the movie. We get stitched to the course of the movie, just like a wound is stitched and covered. So there is an absence of the viewer, but we get stitched to the movie and that absence is covered. So this is actually a very simple theory, but there are so many dimensions to it. And as degree students, you needn't get into those dimensions, just understand what this theory is about in simple terms. So moving on to the next one, the last theory, that is culture industry. So, right from the title, we can understand that it is something connected with culture. It is something connected with industry. So, industry means there is something which is actually giving you a clue to terms like customers, market, okay, some kind of a business. Okay, so let's analyze how it works. So this was a theory which was put forward by the Marxist theorists Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. So please remember these names because these names are very, very important. You needn't get into the depth of these theories, but please do understand when these theories came up, who are the great proponents behind the theory, and finally, what is the simple meaning of this theory. Now, this theory was introduced for the very first time in their work, Dialectic of Enlightenment, which was published in the year 1947. Now, this theory depicts how movies are commercialized and how they become cultural products. Now, movies are actually a part of the society, and therefore definitely in due course they will become cultural products. Now, when you speak about products, when you are analyzing a movie as a product, there should be a market and there should be some consumers, right? Otherwise, there is no point in releasing a product, because when you have a product with you, you should have a market to exhibit that product and you should have consumers coming and buying it. Now, all products are considered as materialization of labor, and there are different kinds of products available in market today. Now, one is a kind of product which is of immediate utility. For example, you buy firewood, you bring it to home, you use it. For example, you buy a paste, you buy a soap, or you buy some vegetables or fruits, you buy it, you come home, you cook it, you eat it. So that is done. It is utilized. It's gone. But at the same time, there are certain other cultural projects which will have a lasting significance. For example, if you buy a book, do you throw it off after reading the book? No, you won't do it. You keep the book in your library, or sometimes if you have a film, if you buy a DVD, you're not going to throw it off. You can watch it again and again, and it has got a lasting significance. Now, sometimes, even if you're not buying things, sometimes it gives a lasting significance in your mind. So, these are known as cultural products, the products which are coming from culture. Now, the Marxist theorists suggested that movies are actually cultural products which are masking exploitation, which means movies are actually standing to serve the capitalist society. So, see, this is Marxism, and therefore capitalism, socialism, all these terms will be coming because this is connected with Marxist theory. So, films actually masked the exploitation happening. So sometimes violence is showcased, sometimes you can see a negative kind of forces are actually showcased. So the theorists here, Adorno and Horkheimer, they suggest that this is actually a reflection of the capitalist society. And because of this, they completely rejected the mass culture. A complete rejection of mass culture happened. So they were totally against this. So they opposed, many thinkers like this, they opposed the entire industry of cinema because they believed that films always masked exploitation, violence, and the negative things happening in society. Now, the Frankfurt School actually made a complete rejection of this mass culture. So, for these theorists, films were not actually a realistic description or a realistic portrayal of the society, but more than that, films actually brought forth some kind of exploitation assisting the capitalist society. So, this is what they believed in, and as a result, they criticized the movie industry on the whole. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of today's session. So, thank you very much for your patient listening. In case if there are any queries or if there are any suggestions, please do connect with me. Please do not hesitate to connect with me. So, here is my email ID. So, thank you very much. Thank you.